Nicole Rawson, the founder of Screen Time Clinic, and I want to welcome you guys to the Digital Wellness Education Summit for parents or people working with parents. And today we have Jen Hoey here with us. She is the founder of the Not My Kid movement, and she's also an author of this amazing book, A Regular Story That Rarely Gets Told. And she has an amazing webinar for you guys to listen to that really speaks to parents about this conception that it's not going to happen to your child, that somehow we should trust our children online. It doesn't matter the age or the income status or what's going on in the home. And I think she has a really important story to tell. And if you watch multiple summit presentations, I hope you'll check out Jen's. And I want Jen to tell us a little bit more about you and what's in your webinar, because this is a great presentation.
Oh, hi, Nicole. And I'm so grateful that you invited me to join this summit. I really am. I think primarily I'm a parent with a story, which I've shared in the book and in the presentation. That began my journey because I was that parent who really felt not my kid. Mm-hmm. I had all the restrictions in place and had all the conversations, and I felt quite secure with that until something did happen to my child. And my entire presentation is based around providing cyber safety tips for parents in order to keep their children safe and, with any luck, prevent something similar from happening to one of their kids.
Yeah, that's great. And tell me a little bit more about your qualifications, because you have taken many courses and just immersed yourself in this niche industry over the years here, and you have so much to share. I know I've been following you for quite some time, and I'm so honored to have you give this presentation. And I think it's really valuable for parents, especially with girls, little girls, teenage girls. I mean, there's so many different aspects nowadays that just keep coming up, from OnlyFans to, the little seemingly innocent games that they get involved in. So tell me a little bit about all your qualifications, because I love hearing them.
Well, to start off with, I've been managing my husband's psychiatric practice for over a decade now. And that has really highlighted for me that we are seeing an increasing problem with our children and our teens, and much of which is directly related to gaming and social media use. In addition, when I started out on this, when I started Not My Kid 2 years ago, my little boy had just started primary school, and I looked extensively for a formal qualification in cyber safety, and I really struggled to find one. So I embarked on many courses, as you've just touched on, yes. and eventually last year, started a degree in cybersecurity and awareness. However, I have made a decision recently to move from that degree into criminology and criminal justice, because my primary area of interest is preventing child exploitation and protecting children. Yeah. So there's quite a bit there. I've also done a certificate in counseling and psychology, because I do offer, parent consultations. Yes. But I think it's an ongoing process of learning. That's what I've discovered. The internet and technology is moving at a pace where not one of us can sit back and feel adequately qualified. Yep. We have to keep our finger on the pulse.
Yeah, we do. And all of these presentations, in business and everything in life, if you can just take a tidbit from each one that inspires you to do better and have an eye-opening experience, I think it's so well worth the 25, 30 minutes that you sit and listen and really absorb this information. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story, sharing your expertise, offering this book on Amazon. I don't know if this is, you can see it, but there's so much information out there, and Jen is a wealth of it. And in Australia, Sydney, it seems like you guys are a little bit ahead of the times with digital wellness education, and Canada and Europe too. I'm based in San Diego, as you know, and it's just really nice for parents to get that international perspective about what's going on and hear from people like you. So
Well, thank you. And I love liaising with you as well. As you've just said, I pick up bits of information from all the educators who are working in this space. And I love collaborating because I don't believe that there's any one person who could say, I am the expert. And so that's why I'm really excited to join this summit, Nicole.
Yeah, and we really certainly believe that at Screen Time Clinic. So thanks for joining us. And if you're watching this, I really encourage you to go spend a little bit of time for yourself, listen to Jen's webinar, and we're so excited to have you be part of this. So let's take a look.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jen and I'm from Not My Kid. I'm very excited to be with you all today, all the way from Sydney, Australia. I thought I'd start the presentation by giving you a little bit of background about myself. As I said, I live in Sydney and I'm a mum of a 17 and 19-year-old. I started Not My Kid 2 years ago when my son started primary school, and I became increasingly concerned with how little awareness the parents around me seemed to have when it came to the dangers our children can face online. So what I did is I started a Facebook group and I invited friends and other professionals to join the group. I invited professionals because I don't believe there can be one expert in this space, and therefore collaboration is essential. I wanted to create a community of like-minded people and a space where people could find articles or ask questions as they navigate this journey with their children. The group has now reached nearly 3,000 members, which is very encouraging. In addition, I work with my husband in his psychiatric practice. I've been managing the practice for over a decade now. And in recent years, we have noticed an increase in the number of referrals for teenagers. Some of the problems they're presenting with are directly linked to social media and gaming. So I'd say for the girls, primarily it's social media, and the problems we're seeing are linked to self-esteem and bullying and exclusion. And for boys, a lot of it is problematic gaming. In addition, I have started a degree in cybersecurity and behavior to further my knowledge in this space, and I have a certificate in counseling and psychology. So I do offer parent consultations. Some of the parents who contact me are just needing some cyber safety tips or really just wanting to know how to start the journey with their children, and others are facing significant problems. The journey didn't, however, begin just 2 years ago. I do come to into this space with some personal experience. The most significant being my daughter's experience when she was 9. So what happened was we had rules in place at home about computer use. We had spoken to the children about not communicating with anyone online that they had not met in person. But despite this, curiosity got the better of her, and while she was at a friend's house, she went online and a predator started communicating with her. She went on the game a number of times, and after some time she was threatened and she got scared. It took her 2 years to be able to disclose what had happened. And during that time, we noticed a child who'd been once vibrant, outgoing, with a lot of interests, turn into a child who gave up many of those interests. She became listless, withdrawn, and started eating a lot less. She was eventually diagnosed with clinical depression. One night, 2 years later, she called me into her bedroom. She was crying hysterically, and she said, "Mummy, I've done something terrible." She wasn't able to verbalize it, and on a piece of paper she wrote 2 words: sex and game. Now, my gut instinct told me what she was trying to tell me, and my response was to remain utterly calm and comfort her, despite my internal feelings of hysteria. I wrote a story 2 years ago, initially just for myself as part of a healing process. At the time, she was unable to speak about the event at all, and she said she did not want to read the story. But a number of weeks later, she came and asked me if she could, and subsequently asked me if she could share it with a friend. And the healing process began for both of us, I have to say. Late last year, after the passing of Colin Karchner, who was someone I admired tremendously, I went to her and I asked her how she would feel if I put my name to the story and we went public. And she agreed. So ultimately, I'd have to say that the process of writing the story and going public has been an incredible healing process for both of us. As a result, much of my attention in this space is focusing on keeping children safe, particularly young children, and prevention. Some of the statistics I use today have been taken from the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. The average number of child sex abuse images seized when an offender is arrested in Australia in the mid-2000s was approximately 1,000. Today we're looking at between 10,000 and 80,000 images and videos, and in some cases more than 1 million per arrest. In their research report of February 2020, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation found that 87% of 4 to 7-year-olds use the internet, and 40% of them own their own device, with 16% left unsupervised. 98% of 8 to 11-year-olds use the internet, 40% are left unsupervised, and in addition, 22% of parents stated that they would allow their child to use the internet anywhere in the home without supervision. A number of misconceptions were raised in their report. One, it only happens to disadvantaged or neglected children. The reality is it can happen to any child. High school children are more at risk. The reality is that 60% of cases involve prepubescent children. Parental controls and other filters are sufficient in keeping children safe online. While they are essential to form a buffer, they do not filter many social media apps and games, and this includes YouTube. Children are safer on games than social media or messaging apps. Unfortunately, predators make it their business to frequent anywhere that children congregate online. Grooming is a slow process and parents would have time to pick up the signs. Sadly, grooming can happen in simply a matter of minutes. Child exploitation is not a common problem in Australia. Well, I think as we all know, anywhere in the world that a child is online, they are at risk. And sadly, child exploitation is on the rise. So what do we do and how do we keep our children safe? I start with basic protective behavior education. The very first tip is to please teach your children the correct names for their body parts. Now, there are 2 reasons why this is so important. Number one, research has shown that predators are put off if a child uses the correct name for a body part, as they become then aware that there's conversation going on in the home and that there's a higher likelihood a child will disclose something to a carer or a parent. Secondly, if your child were to have to make a report, the process becomes a lot quicker and simpler if they're using the correct names for body parts. This is very important from a legal perspective. Ask your child to create a safety team. Sit with them and get them to choose 5 adults that they feel they can approach with anything. Now, those 5 adults should not all be within the same family. They can have mum or dad, but ask them to choose somebody from school or perhaps the local church they attend or even an extracurricular activity. that they attend. In addition, ensure that they choose 5 adults who they feel will believe them if they had to disclose something. The reality is children don't make disclosures without some truth behind them. The next tip is early warning signs. Explore where your child feels nervous in their body and let them know where you feel nervous. We all feel nervous in different ways. Some of us may have shaky legs, some of us may get a stomach ache, clammy hands, and remind them that whenever they feel their early warning signs, they should come to you, but that it doesn't necessarily signify danger, but that it is your role as the adult to establish whether a situation is safe or unsafe. So an example of a safe situation where a child may feel their early warning signs is a trip to the dentist. Secrets. It's very important to explain the difference between a safe and an unsafe secret to your child. An unsafe secret has no end and is usually accompanied with early warning signs, whereas a safe secret is a surprise, for example, a birthday present or a surprise party. Now, I have had some parents tell me that they never use the word secret in their home, they only use surprise, and that's fine. I have recently been informed by a colleague that predators have started to use the word surprise in their interaction with children, and therefore within the area of protective behavior we do like to use safe and unsafe secret and distinguish the difference. Tricky versus stranger. So we get a lot of information. We've had a lot of information about stranger danger. However, it is recommended that you use the word tricky rather than stranger. An important point to remember is that predators in the physical world and online are not always strangers. The Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation have recently released a podcast series called Closing the Net, and they highlight this point in that podcast. Online interaction. Never interact with anyone online who you haven't met in person. This is something we really do need to reiterate to our children, and we need to remind them that this includes friends of friends. Now, when I say meet in person, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation last year mentioned that children have been who talk to somebody online for just a number of minutes have reported no longer seeing that person as a stranger. So we really do need to emphasize to them that anybody who they engage with online, they really need to know in person. We also need to bear in mind that predators are cunning and that they do their very best to get into the world and the space our children frequent online. Sex education. Now, this is a tough area for some parents, and I'm not sure if everyone will agree with some of the advice that I provide to you, but it really is, in my opinion, the best way to keep your child safe. And that is, first of all, to bear in mind that the internet is a lousy educator when it comes to sex education. Educate your child about sex before they start primary school and introduce the subject of porn by the age of 8 in an age-appropriate way. The more comfortable you are talking with your child about these subjects, the more comfortable they will be to come to you. Now, I started when my son was 5. I read him a book called Where Did I Come From? We've read that book many times, and when I first read it, I read it in a very matter-of-fact way, and he took it in, I think, almost like just a definition for something. He had a couple of questions, and every time we've revisited the book, he has different questions. But I think it just gives an example of how the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable they will be asking all sorts of questions. In addition, recently I've introduced the subject of porn. He's not yet 8 years old. And the way I did that was simply to say to him that there are people who put pictures and videos of themselves or other people having sex on the internet, but that is not called sex, that is called porn, and often they are hurting each other, and it can be very confusing and upsetting at times, and that he should feel happy and comfortable to come to me if he were to see anything like that on the computer. I make it a very clear distinction between sex and porn. I don't believe they fall in the same category. In addition, it's worth bearing in mind that the recent statistics show that the average age a child will be exposed is 8. So even if your child is not being exposed and is 8 or 9, I think it's worth bearing in mind that it's a matter of when and not if they are exposed. So this conversation is a very important one. Device use. Never allow your child on an internet-connected device in their bedroom or bathroom. It would seem like a very obvious piece of advice, but I still get many parents telling me that their children have their iPads in their bedrooms or their iPhones with them at night. Last year, during the COVID-19 epidemic, police were reporting a conversation on the dark web between predators, emphasizing that they were aware of the fact that parents did not want their children with devices in their bedroom, and that was precisely where they wanted them. So we do need to keep that in the forefront of our mind. Now, in addition, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation's advice is to directly supervise your child when they are online if they're in primary school. This is something I do with my own son. If he's got any schoolwork he has to do that involves going online, I put aside whatever I'm doing and I sit with him. I know it's not necessarily easy for parents to always do that, but it is probably the very best way to keep your children safe. Restrictions, as I've said, are very important. They do provide a buffer. However, they do not filter all the content that is available out there. It's almost impossible to filter the content your child will be viewing. Some of the content I've personally seen includes nudity, self-harm, drug sales, drug use, suicidal ideation, physical violence between peers. It's just a couple off the top of my head. In addition, last year, with restrictions put in place, I did a search on the 4 top social media, or the four most popular platforms used, which included YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram, and I found porn on all 4 in less than 60 seconds. The other thing to bear in mind is that we may not necessarily see the same content that our children are seeing. Hashtags are changed, the spelling of words are changed, so that is something to also bear in mind. Now, this rating that we see on the App Store, it is just worth keeping or knowing that it has nothing to do with the actual safety of the platform. It has to do with data laws and data sharing. So that is something just worth bearing in mind. So my recommendation is to delay. I would encourage you to delay access to gaming and social media for as long as possible. With the number of cases we're starting to see in our practice, my concern is that this is a problem that is going to be escalating, not decreasing. In fact, in my husband's words, he has said to me, we're at the beginning of a tsunami of trauma, and that is very concerning to hear. Children are being exposed to content that they just simply cannot digest. And the other thing to bear in mind is when they do have access, we do need to remember that they will be exposed to inappropriate content. So conversations become even more important. I would recommend downloading an app first if your child is asking for it and having a look around. But do bear in mind what I mentioned previously, and that is that we don't necessarily see the content that they're seeing. I've had this conversation with my oldest son, and one of the things he told me was basically that sometimes kids are just tagged into posts and there aren't even hashtags attached to them. And as I've said before, spelling of words has changed into completely random words are associated with certain images, words you would not necessarily associate with them. We also need to remember it's very hard to monitor some of the apps. I definitely caution strongly against TikTok and Snapchat, in particular Snapchat. It is almost impossible to adequately monitor Snapchat, and it is one of the apps where I see the most drug use, drug sales, and suicidal ideation, not to mention sexting. That's a big one for sexting, so please bear that in mind. It's really important for us to start as we mean to go on. Our young children are not necessarily going to be the same children at 15 years old. So if you're going to introduce anything, set firm limits on the time that they spend. And as I said, just bear in mind that your child will push the boundaries, and as they get older, it may be harder and harder to enforce those boundaries unless you've had a very strict regime in place. We also have to bear in mind that children's brains develop at a certain pace. We can't necessarily speed that development up. So I get a lot of parents telling me how mature their children are, and I'm sure that they are, and I'm sure that there are some children who make very sensible decisions, but the vast majority struggle. They're curious and impulsive, and we really cannot speed up the development of their brain. And I think that's really crucial to remember. I like the word chat. I'm not a big one for conversation. I feel like conversation implies a serious lecture or long conversation, which is one thing children hate. So I encourage chats, make them short and sweet. Stop the moment you lose your child's attention. Remind them that they can always come to you. And it's important to be aware of how you will respond if they do come to you with something. The advice is to respond incredibly calmly. The Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation's report stated that 80% of parents said they would respond with anger if their child came to them with something such as sexting or cyberbullying. And 70% of children said they would rather go to a peer than a parent, and that's very worrying. However, I think we do need to, in the midst of all these honest and open chats, we do need to bear in mind one crucial factor, and this is something my own daughter raised with me last year. She said, "Mummy, adults seem to forget that children also experience feelings of shame, and it's really hard sometimes to come forward and to tell parents when you are feeling that way." And I thought that was a really important message on her part, and it is something that I do keep in the forefront of my mind. Ultimately, children do not want to disappoint us, but more importantly, as adults, we know how hard it is to come forward if we've done something that we're not terribly proud of and we're feeling ashamed. So despite providing our children with the conversation, the restrictions, the warnings, we do need to bear in mind that we're asking a lot of them to go out and navigate this online world and then to come to us if they've done something wrong, because those feelings of shame can be really overwhelming. I'm a big supporter of boredom and imagination. I really firmly believe that preserving imagination is preserving childhood. My own son is screen-free, apart from some limited television, And one of the things I enjoy the most is watching him play and use his imagination. I think it's a crucial part of childhood, as well as for their social development. Children these days are not experiencing the social experiences we had, navigating friendships, and I think that's something that we do also need to bear in mind when we give them time online. Not to mention the fact that the online world tends to magnify social problems, and it can be very alienating and very lonely and very overwhelming. So hence, once again, my emphasis is on delaying. Ultimately, what we're wanting to do is to remember that the internet is not age segregated. And therefore, as parents, it really is our role to delay for as long as possible and to supervise them when they are online. And in turn, we will be protecting them. That is the very best way forward for all of us. Well, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I hope I hope some of it's been helpful. My website is notmykid.com.au. The Facebook parent group is Not My Kid. It's easily found on Facebook. I'm the most active on Facebook, but I also have an Instagram account, which is notmykid_ever. And as I said, I'm more than happy to provide any support to any parents who are feeling in need of some support or some guidance or some advice. I thank you very much once again for listening to the presentation.